SME, mostly within the government. I think we can talk about the last 15 years, for example, when Dubai SME, or before even Dubai SME started, the scene was different. We had many scattered maybe initiatives and then policies, but moving forward, I can see that all of these initiatives are coming down together. We see many new players. There are a lot of incubation centers. There are a lot of maybe tech-specific somehow incubation centers. But at the same time, we see a lot of policies. So the attention from government has always been also there. True, there are certain programs that focused on Emirati nationals when we started, but since 2009, we launched many other initiatives. And maybe I would like to highlight something that, especially within Dubai SME, I think the approach we've taken was always practical. So, or we can call it, as has been described lately, as policy experimentation. So we try it out practically, and then we prove the concept, and then we can show the government the impact, and then maybe adopt it as a policy, which was really happening recently with the SME 100 program. So yes, we have many initiatives to support startups. We started looking at initiatives to support SMEs at different levels of the life cycle. So focusing on growth SMEs was also a main objective of the SME 100. But end of day, whatever we're doing now under the Dubai 2021 is actually to bring all these initiatives under bigger umbrella. So for all SMEs at different stages, whether they're startups or growing, whether they're in innovative sectors, in ICT, or even in conventional sectors, we're trying to bring all these SMEs together and let them share the vision of the government. So currently, with the initiatives of the Dubai 2021, there will be new platforms where SMEs or even SME owners will know how to align with government directions, will know how to tap into these different packages or supports or incentives. And it will be open to everybody in Dubai. So I think when I looked at the goofy slide that Dr. Abdulaziz shared with all the minds, to be honest, I mean, it's a quick maybe brief about everything happening and how Dubai SME or the government, what role we can play to make it as safe as possible to go through the growth journey. That's it.
Yes. Sorry, I just wanted to add that the government usually is trying to support, in Dubai at least, it is trying to support always SMEs on two dimensions. The first dimension is the local dimension, where basically ease of doing business and the fair playground that we try to provide. And the other one is a dimension of global expansion, as Dr. Safadi mentioned in his presentation this morning, where we'll help you basically to export more, probably access new markets, etc. But if I combine this with the innovation theme that some of my colleagues just talked about, people think that innovation is coming from companies where you're putting a group of scientists together with a lot of technology and availability of budget, tools, etc. Actually, that was true 15 or 20 years ago, but it's not anymore true. If you look even at the new ideas that big companies are inventing, or even small SMEs are coming up with and commercializing, they are coming from probably a small SME that is sitting in Asia or in Europe or somewhere else in the globe, where the big company will hear about this new idea and then buy it and commercialize it. So basically, the innovation is happening individually through people like you in different places. The question is, how can you capture this idea and commercialize it? That's where the real success is. So when I looked at the 6 companies that got the Disruptive Award this morning, I felt very proud that these companies were established in Dubai, and that's excellent. So that's a good news. You would see, if we look at the percentages or the historical performance of SMEs, I would say out of these 6, probably 1 or 2 will become global in 5 years' time. But the bad news is 3 of them will go bankrupt, and that's guaranteed. Why? Because if you are unable to work the commercialization and expansion of your model and innovate and keep innovating on it, then your demise is as they mentioned, is very near.
Yes, that's a very good point. I also like to share my view is that I find that Dubai is not just a place for startups to start, but the rate of scalability is much higher. Because I compare myself from the startup environment in Singapore, I did a rough anecdotal study and found that in Singapore it took like 5 to 7 years for SMEs to be profit positive. But in the Dubai context, I've seen companies become profitable within 2.5 years to 3 years. And that tells you about the business environment in Dubai, which is very opportunity based. And the government has come up with lots of initiatives. I mean, recent would be the smart city, the open data, and the smart city is going to be almost a plug and play system in the sense that all SMEs in the tech space can literally bid for, projects within the smart city concept to experiment with their new applications. So I think that is something where the government also provides the opportunities for growth besides enabling the environment. The other area I would like to also highlight is that in the Dubai Plan 2021, one of the key words that has been bandied around is productivity. Productivity underpins competitiveness. And I think Dubai SME has done some studies and found that a lot of our SMEs here are doing pretty well, but I think more can be done to improve their productivity. So productivity basically is about how they use their labor resources and capital to improve the output. And I believe moving forward, as competition intensifies, we need initiatives that would help the SMEs manage productivity better. So I don't know whether maybe Essam, you can comment on this productivity.
Yeah, I think a quick comment maybe. The first thing that we believe our role is as government is when we talk about productivity and we want to enhance productivity of the sector or even link it to competitiveness, I think the first role will be to have common language with the SME owners. So maybe as a term, productivity is not somehow relevant to them because it's usually used in our reports, in our own government, maybe policies. But from the SME side, I think our role as government is maybe to simplify the concepts and show them the ways. So for you as an SME owner, maybe revenue generating is an issue. So you want to have more access to more markets, or you have to be integrated to international value chains, to export, to drive more revenues. So even our terminology or initiatives should be somehow simplified and make sense to businesses.
Yes.
It's a win-win scenario. For example, if we know the scenario here in UAE where a lot of businesses in the mostly services and trading sectors depend on cheap labor, and again, when you do the formulas, this is one of the, for example, inputs for low productivity. So if I want to support SMEs to adopt technology, to automate certain processes or to robotize certain production lines, then I should have certain initiatives to be clear and targeted towards these sectors. End of day, we as government, we will achieve whatever we're looking for, but at the same time, I'm making this easy to all SME owners to align themselves with our own strategies. So yes, we do have a couple of initiatives that are part of the plan. Some of the initiatives will be launched soon in the second half of 2016. But as I mentioned, all of the initiatives are somehow coming all together under a bigger program. So whenever we recognize a company for being high in productivity or for adopting certain technologies, it means that this company will be maybe recognized by the government, will be also eligible for certain incentives or support, and will maybe have access to more contracts from government and partners. So we're trying to align all our initiatives with certain rewards programs or systems.
Okay,
If I
Thanks,
can just
Usam.
add out here, Alex, I think productivity is the second stage. Personally, I think that we should encourage a platform whereby we sell the brand UAE. So we talk about made in UAE. I think we are very good at doing the biggest and the best, but at the same time, we need to take our products and services internationally. Right now, there's a lot of trading which happens, so we have international markets that we target, but we essentially import and we export. We should take homegrown brands to international markets, and I think we can start with the region itself. The population in UAE is about close to 10 million, but if you talk about the neighboring countries, that can give a big boost to SMEs if they have the platform to reach out to these markets and homegrown brands. So the SMEs which have been born and brought up in UAE should be taken international.
Yeah. Do we have room for 1 or 2 questions for audience? Yeah. Yes, please.
Can I ask you 3 questions, very quick questions? Is it okay to ask you 3 questions?
1 question, please.
Okay, my first question is to the first gentleman who spoke about the GDP, the contribution of the SME sector to GDP. I've read in different sources, the contribution varies, and this is also from government sources. It varies from sometimes it is reported as 40%, sometimes it's reported as high as 63%. So which one is the correct one on the average? Because from 40 to 60 is a very big variation. My second question is the contribution of the SME sector in GCC countries, other GCC countries, is very low. And it could be in some countries, it's almost insignificant as compared to UAE. Can you just tell us what is so special about SME sector in UAE that is different from the rest of the GCC country? One last question is for the second gentleman. Do you evaluate government initiatives and programs? Say that you introduce a policy today. 5 years from today, do you evaluate the impact of your policy to see what works and what doesn't work? Thank you very much.
Yes. For the share of GDP, actually, you would see countries ranging between 40 and 60, especially in developed economies. There is no right or correct answer. The question is how much value added they are adding to the economy. So if I go to China, for example, you would see SMEs contributing around 60%. If you go to the UAE or Dubai, you would see around 40%. If I go to the Europe, sorry? Yeah, sorry?
I'm not talking about other countries. I'm talking about your own country in UAE. The government reports different contributions. Sometimes it's 60. I would understand if it varies by 2-3%.
I think it's I got the point. You're referring to the federal and the local. So in Dubai it's 40%, but federal level UAE is 60%. So that's why you're hearing different.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
I was hoping that nobody would ask this question, actually. I'm afraid that I don't have an answer for the UAE level because in Dubai Statistics Center we have the information that I would consider reliable to us as Dubai government. Our contribution to the economy, the SME's contribution to the economy is about 40%. They have calculated, however, the contribution of SMEs over the whole UAE and reported it's around 60%, and targeting to raise it up to 70% by 2021. Frankly speaking, I don't know from where they get this number, because we know that we represent 32% of the economy, of the UAE economy as Dubai, and we represent 40%. But the answer to this question is a task force that is trying to solve this I would say, myth of how much is really the contribution of the economy of SMEs and the rest of the Emirates. And probably it's 60%, but we know that Dubai is way below that. But again, being 40% or 60% is not the core focus that we're looking at today. The core focus is the productivity level of these SMEs, because if you represent today 60% of the economy and only contributing to productivity levels that are very low, or contributing to the economy in general, and the value added that is being created, your level of contribution is very low, then the number doesn't matter much. Because if I look at the number of SMEs as in terms of companies, it's 95% of companies in the country.
In Dubai.
So imagine 95 and they only providing 40%. So coming to your second question, why it's different in other GCC countries, unfortunately, the expansion of big companies and GREs, government-related companies, is determining the distribution of these shares. So you would see in other Emirates, like Abu Dhabi, for example, or in other countries like Saudi Arabia, GREs are taking big proportion of certain sectors. And we could call it to a certain extent a monopoly by the government. So that's why you would see limited businesses for SMEs within these sectors. And hence, once you calculate their proportion in GDP, you would see it very, very slow, very low. The target is, and that's the good news in the UAE and GCC, the plan to expand or increase the share of SMEs in the whole economy means that they will limit by time the contribution of GREs and make sure that they will open up more businesses to SMEs. However, the question is not what to do, is how to do it, and that's the critical question.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I believe we have to
Hi.
end this.
She holds the
No,
mic,
no.
so you can stop her.
Okay, just please, a very quick
Okay.
one.
My question is about startup costs. In the developed world, the cost of opening a company is very, very low. And a company as global as Apple, for example, started from somebody's garage and developed to be a big company. Don't you think that lowering the cost of setting businesses in the UAE would, increase the economic growth or increase the SME development, especially with taxes being introduced soon, so you're losing the edge,
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So we just finished doing a big survey over on all the 400 startups that we have, and on average, a startup uses about $114,000 in their first year. In the second year, they're asking for $250,000 in their second year. Setting up a business in Dubai Silicon Oasis costs you around $3,000–4,000. So that's actually a very, very small portion of what startups are using in the first
You
year.
can incorporate for only 1,000, and for a regular company, it's like around $100 just registration in Canada, for example. And you can incorporate for 1,000, and you don't even have to incorporate. You can work from your garage, you can work from anywhere. But over here, you have to have just registrations and things like that. Don't you think, even the government bodies, don't you think that lowering this cost would really encourage a lot of people to start their own businesses?
Well, I think, just to answer your question again, I think right now the cost of setting up a company has dropped dramatically over the past years in Dubai. When I came to Dubai 4 years ago, we didn't have what we have today. You needed to come up with 100,000 dirham capital. You need to rent an office. You could easily spend 50, 60, 70,000 dirham just to start a business. Now we're down to 13,000, 14,000 dirham. Hopefully it will go down even further, but right now we see that that's not an impediment for people to start up their business. It's already this low. I started up businesses in South America and in Europe. When I started up my last business in Europe, I had to come up with 25,000 euro to start the business. I have heard that has been reduced dramatically now, just exactly as you said, because that encourages more people to set up. Unfortunately, you still need money to start a business. So regardless if you spend it on some of that money to register your company, don't be fooled into thinking that you don't need cash to run that business. If you don't, that's going to hurt. So don't start a business or a startup unless you have some cash on the bank that you are willing to risk 100%. So I hope that answers your question.
Of course, but operational expenses are different from setting up. It's like pre-taxation.
And they should be kept as low as possible, and that's exactly why Dubai Silicon Oasis have said, let's lower this price, let's make a very special deal. So with us you can rent a flexi desk, which is first come, first serve. The desk itself is 7,500 dirham, and then there's a registration fee of 5,000 on top of that. So even the trade license is much lower, but this is exclusively for startups only, and they can avail of that for 3 years.
May I just add to this, because we usually get this question a lot, and you rarely get the answer that you're looking for. Are the cost of business, starting up a business, would the cost of starting up a business would go down moving forward? The answer is, I really doubt it will happen. Why? Because look at all metropolitan cities, not Dubai. Look at New York, look at Paris, look at London. You rarely see the cost of doing business going down. The government is always trying to do its best, of course, to provide you with an acceptable rate that you should have to start up with your business. However, given that there is so much demand, so economically speaking, from the macroeconomic perspective, there is so much demand compared to the supply and the limitations that we have, your cost of doing business